All right. It is 1 minute after the hour, and I'm tired of sitting here quietly. Um, Welcome to So You Inherited a Mess, First Steps in Adopting a Legacy Project. Thank you all so much for coming today. I hope you're having a great time in Florida, maybe literally or maybe only spiritually in Florida, like I am myself only in spiritually in Florida. A little bit about me. I am Tara King. I work at Pantheon on our developer relations team. And what that means is I work with developers who use Pantheon to help them get the most out of Pantheon. And then I sort of take feedback back to the company and help make Pantheon better for developers. But more and more lately, we're talking to people who are not developers. We're talking to marketers, we're talking to product owners, all kinds of different people who are working on websites. And this talk kind of comes a little bit out of that experience of talking to all these different people in these different roles. And also from my own experience as a developer inheriting messy projects, which I'll talk about in a moment. I am on the internet as Sparkling Robots. I've been tweeting this morning. Feel free to say hi if you want to do that. It's also my name on Drupal.org. Or if you want to follow up, my email, tara.king@pantheon.io. I am always happy to talk Pantheon, Drupal, board games, all kinds of things. So don't be shy. When I'm not talking about Pantheon, Drupal, and board games, I'm usually playing board games. And I'm an advocate for diversity and inclusion in free and open source software communities. I am coming to you today from Albuquerque, New Mexico on Tablelands, and I use she, her, or they, them pronouns. And so this talk, like I said, was inspired by all these different folks that I'm meeting and the problems that they're seeing on their projects. And it's also kind of inspired by all of the very bad projects I've worked on over the years. I would say the vast majority of projects that I worked on as a developer were not fresh, new, exciting projects. They were not what you might call a greenfield project. They are janky, broken, well-loved, but ill-cared for legacy projects. So that's a little bit about my history. I've worked from freelance, solo contract type work through having a small agency, working at agencies, working in-house as a developer, and now, of course, working on a platform. So I feel like I've kind of seen these projects from all different angles, and I hope I can give some insights into how to make these legacy projects a little more worthwhile. And because even though I think GatherTown is amazing and I'm really enjoying walking around talking to people, I also wanted to build in a little bit more conversation into the actual talk time because we don't have the hallway track. I can't see all of your smiling faces or frowning faces, and we don't get to meet after the talk. So if you don't mind just dropping in the chat a quick introduction, name, pronouns if you want to, your title and company, and then your location. And then if you have a legacy project you're dealing with, I would love to hear a little bit about it. Of course, you can obscure names to protect the innocent or the guilty, depending. Kind of helps me understand the perspective you're bringing to the project, and maybe I can sort of customize for the different people in the room today. So while you're doing that, I am expecting that the people in this room, oh no, I'm sorry, I just heard I'm breaking up a little bit. I am wireless. I unfortunately don't have a hard line, but let me know if it gets too wobbly. I do have a backup MiFi option. Thanks, Will, for introducing yourself. So who I'm expecting to be in the room today and who I wrote the talk for are people who are dealing with a frustrating legacy project and who are responsible for that project's success. So if you're not a developer, and I'm talking about developer stuff, all that means is that you can take this to your dev team and ask them, hey, what's the status on these types of things? And if you're not on the business side or the marketing side, and I'm talking about that kind of stuff, again, just know that you can take it to your team. The real thing with these kinds of projects is that I think it takes the whole team to get everything sort of running and working as efficiently and effectively as possible. So that's all the background. Thanks for all these. Yeah, Drupal 7 that hasn't been touched in 5 to 6 years. Like, oh, sad fear. I feel that. This talk is going to be a little bit, I'm going to date myself, like a 17 magazine personality quiz where you sort of self-score as you go along. So I don't know if you want like a pencil or a notepad doc or something like that. Hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a short list of tasks that you can go back to your team and say, okay, these are the things we need to focus on. So what do I mean when I talk about legacy, right? I feel like it can mean a lot of different things. The definition I'm using is that it's a project that has lived for a long time. And it's typically a project that was built by someone who no longer works on it. So there's some lost history. There's, decisions were made. Who knows who made them? Oh yeah, inherited some D6 projects. Yep. And I think as somebody who's worked on a number of legacy sites, I think they get a bad rap, right? They're not as glamorous as the newest, hottest thing. And I remember going to so many sessions at camps and cons where it's like, this time we're going to get it right. All those other projects are doomed. We cannot save them. We're going to redo it and we're going to get it right this time. But in my experience, it's almost always wishful thinking, because even if you can get the budget for the big, splashy redesign, rebuild, it doesn't usually pan out that way. And it eventually just becomes yet another terrible legacy site that you want to rebuild, right? And you just want to burn them all to the ground. Because websites are organic, and websites are going to change as the project changes, as the world around us changes. And if you have to do a full relaunch every time your goals change, that's just expensive. I personally think it's a waste of time. You're losing all the good stuff from the legacy project in that transition. So the sort of like poster child that I've been thinking of for this is, 2020, a lot of things happened. A lot of things went really bad for people. And there was this tiny local boutique here in Albuquerque. They're called the Octopus and the Fox. And their brick and mortar store had a static website that I think had an address, hours, and that was pretty much it. I don't even think they had like a contact form or a phone number. And in about 2 weeks after the pandemic started, original brochure site, but they also had added this full e-commerce option without having to do a full rebuild. And I was really, really impressed that this very, very small company with very little resources was able to kind of invest in what they had and make it better, instead of kind of saying, oh, well, it'll take us 6 months to get the perfect solution. They just got up, I think it was like 10 products, and then kind of kept iterating on it over the pandemic. And ultimately I did almost all my Christmas shopping there, and they've now moved to a fully online store. So really, really cool experience. And I hope we can all take, if they can manage it, we can all do it too. I'm sure you may be sitting here thinking like, okay, yeah, well, you haven't seen my mess of a project. That's true. I have not seen your mess of a project, but I have seen a lot of messes. D7 sites with literal years of unapplied security updates, projects where nobody knew who built it or why, but they needed to keep it alive and they weren't really sure why. So I wanted to kind of flag what I think of as signs of trouble when you have this legacy project. And these are the things that you're going to want to take advantage, kind of look into really, really quickly. So if your team is afraid to deploy, as a developer, I've certainly been there where I'm sweating bullets working on the live environment because there was no other way to get anything done. And the management wouldn't invest in any kind of real tooling for me. Oof, never doing that again. I remember I was working on a site, it was a D7 site at the time, and it had a database that had been started in the 70s. And obviously it was not a Drupal database at that point, but it had been migrated into newer and newer database systems as time went by. And now that entire history of that organization was locked up in this Drupal database that had no backups, that had no development environments, nothing at all. It was just this very fragile, delicate system that held their entire organizational history. Oof, do not want to do that again. That was a really stressful one. So that's a sign that your website's in trouble. If the site is slow and nobody knows why, typically means you don't have the kind of observability of the performance of your application, and that can be a lot of trouble. Nobody remembers what the site is for. I definitely have inherited projects and asked, well, why are we making all these? What's the point of all these changes? And nobody really knows. It's sort of we have a website, so we're going to keep having a website. Years of unapplied security updates, huge red flag there. I've seen sites with security updates not applied all the way back pre-Drupalgeddon 1. And at that point, the site has definitely been compromised. So that's a real red flag, but still fixable. Sites with accessibility problems, or no one's ever even thought about accessibility for the site. And of course, there are many, many more red flags that you might come across. Yeah, no one has a password to the old Apple server running the librarian's blog. Yep, that sounds pretty legit. So if you're going to inherit this kind of hot mess of a project, I wanted to give a framework that we're using a lot at Pantheon these days, but it is totally not Pantheon specific. It's not even Drupal specific. You could use it on any web project. Because I really think that these websites still have a lot of value. They've generally been road tested. You already have a lot of information in there. And so I kind of prefer this sort of iterative approach where you're gradually, improving it. Although who doesn't love to burn a bad site to the ground? Let's save that bad site. And how we're going to do that is using the web ops model. So This is a cycle. It's not a staircase. It's not a specific path. I will get, sorry, I'm totally reading chat here. I will get a link to these slides by the end of the session. I'll tweet them out. So this is what we call the web ops model at Pantheon. And this is based on everyone at Pantheon having worked on tons and tons of projects and seeing what's really, really working and what's really, really not working. And this is not sort of a staircase. This is a cycle. So you can start kind of anywhere and make gains. But I promised that we would make a short list of things that we're going to fix on the site. So I'm going to start in one very specific place. That is the top layer, the impact layer. So this is sort of step 0 for any web project, in my opinion. And that is to find out what is the point of the project, right? What is the project actually trying to get done? Is it to raise money for your organization? Is it to sell shoes? Is it to connect employees or build community? I really don't see the point in doing a massive rebuild or doing a ton of the work we're about to talk about next if you don't actually know why you're making these changes, right? Then you're just kind of spinning your wheels. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the impact of the website, which is what is the most important thing your website does. So take a moment, like I said, self-rate on your 17 quiz or your BuzzFeed quiz or whatever the current new quizzes is, because I don't actually know. So take a note. What is the most important thing your website does? If you don't know, you're probably going to have some uncomfortable conversations with your client or your boss or whoever's owning the project. Sometimes there's not even a project owner, actually. So then there's a whole other process of sorting out who's going to take on that responsibility. But this is super, super important. I remember, and this can happen any size of project. I was at a very large media company, and I was hired because we were 2 weeks away from launching a site. And I was going to be the person to get it over the finish line. And then we were going to work on it and improve it. And when I got there, it was an intranet, and people were like, well, we have to have an intranet. We just have to have one. But nobody actually really had a clear sense. I still to this day don't know exactly what the other team wanted, like what the marketing team that was running it wanted. And we actually launched 18 months later. And the product was, in my opinion, not that different from what we started with, right? It was like lots and lots of small tweaks. So it was 18 months of not having the tool available because nobody knew what the point of it was. So we were constantly kind of redesigning things for no real purpose. So this is really the fundamental thing that I think any legacy project, you have to have a really clear idea, because as soon as you know what it's about and what it's for, then you can move into making it better at doing that thing. And then you're going to start to show that value of the legacy project instead of just having it be a thorn in your side. So then the first question is, once you have that, what's the most important thing? How do you measure the rate of success, right? So if it's newsletter signups, how many are you getting per week or per month or per day? If it's page speed, if it's number of pages served, specific pages might be really super important to your organization. So you need to make sure you have a way of measuring the rate of success. If you've got that, then you can level up with how often are you reviewing that? How much does that score drive the ongoing updates to the site? So if it's 10% of work is driven by your rate of success, you're probably not seeing a lot of change in this number. Maybe you are, maybe you're lucky. And then of course, how frequently do you make changes in order to improve the score? I think this is so important to have this kind of North Star, this guiding light. This will really help the project kind of get off to the right in the right direction. And then you want to iterate to success. So these are the 2 different points of that same impact level. Measure results, iterate to success. And this is about how often do you make changes to your website. This is both content and functionality. So I think both are really important. As a former developer, it's really easy for me to look at just release cadence, but that's not the whole website. There have definitely been times I've worked on a project where editors were afraid to make changes on the website because they were worried they were going to break something because they had previously broken something because of some kind of instability in the system. If you're not making changes or having the option of making changes at least weekly, but preferably daily, I think that's often a sign that there's a lot of instability and sort of struggle inside of the overall sort of web ops team workflow that you're working with. So if you are making changes regularly, then the next question is going to be, is your team able to meet the requests of leadership? So are you getting a request from above that it's very easy for you to kind of say, yep, we got that, we're going to go ahead and do it? Or are you having to push back? We need to get that security update applied that's 6 months late, that kind of stuff where there's these bottlenecks in the process. And then, also, do you actively maintain a groomed backlog of projects and ideas for the website? I think this is really important for legacy projects because they can have so many things wrong with them that your mind can get dizzy trying to sort that out. And so that's actually what you're doing right now, right? Taking notes on what the next step is for you. So I think this is a way of developing that capability and that capacity to deploy frequently and to make content changes frequently. So now we're going to go to the very bottom of that graphic, but I'm going to leave up in the corner, like a bright shining sun guiding us forward, the impact graphic, because like I said, I think every decision you're doing on these legacy projects, especially early days, should be driven by the impact of the site. Not every site needs to have a full CI process. Not every site needs to have, 10 development environments and this fully robust Git flow process, right? It's okay sometimes to have a really stripped down and simple process, but that's because we're kind of keeping an eye on what the impact of the site is. So while we have our impact in mind, we're going to look at the credibility layer. And this is really about not only, so you want your developers and your content team and your marketing team to have faith and trust in the news. You want them to be able to make the changes they need to make without worrying that they're going to make a mistake and lose their job or put something embarrassing on the website that they can't get back. So there's that kind of credibility. And then there's also the credibility with your customers, right? You want your customers, every time they come to the website, you don't want them to get, oh, the website is down, or some kind of embarrassing PHP error showing, or the website didn't load for 25 seconds today because who knows why. So it's credibility both for the team working on the project and for the customers themselves. So I'm going to first go into the sort of deliver great experience. This is kind of the internal perspective of credibility of, are you able to get your work done without late nights, sweating on weekends, that kind of thing. So deliver great experience. Do your developers have tooling to regularly develop and test changes to your website? Ties back to some of the stuff in the impact level about how often are you making changes. So like I said, things like, can they deploy regularly? Can they test the changes before they get up to live? When you're starting to level up in this area, you're looking at how frequently downtime is happening, how confident you are that your site is secure, making sure those security updates are applied correctly. And this is the only part of the presentation where I'm going to kind of get granular and super prescriptive because it's so important. And I think most Drupal shops are doing this, but I do occasionally run into people who aren't. So I just like to kind of get this out there. This is, to me, table stakes for modern web development. You cannot work without this. I will not take projects on that don't have these things anymore. So version control. If you're not a developer and you're not familiar with what version control is, it's essentially a way for developers to make changes and then undo them without causing sort of ripple effects, disasters. It's super, super, super critical. It means that you're not having a human make, there's like kind of a little bit of a robot step in there, and robots are much more reliable than humans. Super, super important to have version control on the site. I am a stickler for automated backups. If you don't have automated backups, at the very least, you should be taking them manually, early and often, manual backups as often as possible. Like I said, that database that was like 40 years of organizational history that I was working on, every morning when I sat down to work, I would take a backup of the database and the code and the files, because I didn't have anything automated, but at least that way I knew if something went totally wrong, we would only lose a day's worth of work. But even that can be sort of insufficient. They were also accepting a lot of sort of user content at that time. So that would have been a full day's worth of user content loss, which is no bueno, not good at all. And then last, but certainly not least, you want this robust deployment workflow. So this is a way that your developers can have freedom and feel safe making changes without worrying about losing that sort of user content. So obviously on Pantheon, we've got dev, test, and live, and more if you have multi-dev. But you can do this anywhere, even if it's your local machine and then the remote server. I think it's just, like I said, absolutely critical for any project. So I didn't want to skip over it, because if you don't have these things, everything else I'm talking about is going to be very complicated and difficult to achieve. in the same realm of deliver great experience, you need to have an accessibility target for the site. It doesn't mean your site needs to be accessible today, but so many teams just kind of feel bad. They just carry around guilt about not having an accessible website. And I think when you finally just pick a target, it allows you to get it into sprints. It allows you to show to management, hey, this is really important. And it is important because first of all, we want to be good people, but we also don't want to get sued. You can get sued for having an inaccessible website. And this is one of those things, you cannot fix everything at once. So just setting the benchmark is a great first step. Every country has different standards, so I'm not going to go into that in depth, but there are plenty of awesome accessibility talks out there that can walk you through that. And once you have your standard, then you can evaluate, okay, we're 50% of the way there. At the end of next month, we want to be 55%, 60%, whatever works for your team with your availability. And this is really how you start to get that legacy project to look a little less sad and rusty and broken, right? It's not in big leaps, it's in 1 or 2% improvements on all of these different areas. Now we're going to get into maintain performance. So this is more on your customer side, having confidence that your website is awesome. Especially, I feel like as a consumer over the last year, when all of my shopping, like 100% of my shopping is online, I have encountered more and more scam sites that are not selling real products. And they look pretty good. They look pretty reliable. So I think when you're a legitimate and not able to, it looks pretty bad. It makes people a little scared and a little wary. I think the consumer is a little bit wary right now. So at this point, we're not talking about fixing performance issues. We're just talking about a performance target. Run the site through Lighthouse, see what it's performing at. Even if it's like a 12 of 100, that's still information that you can take going forward and start to kind of polish up this previously messy project. And then once you've got your performance target, and maybe you're starting to hit close to your performance target, you can look at how confident are you that your site can handle traffic spikes. So if Oprah tweets about you tomorrow, is the site going down? And then do you load test for traffic spikes? If you do that, I feel like you are really, really nailing it on the sort of performance and credibility layer. But typically for these types of projects, we're still just in the let's find out how bad or how good we're doing today. Maintain performance. How often do you perform security updates? Security updates, I do think of as a credibility thing because your customer needs to trust that their stuff isn't going to get, their information isn't going to get taken, that they're not going to find anything unhelpful, let's say, on your site. And then if you've got security updates performed regularly, let's say, how much are you testing them before they get to deployment? How automated are these tests? And again, what is the frequency of downtime that you experience related to security incidents? And ideally, these numbers are all very high, but with a new project that's maybe a little bit dusty, been sitting in a corner for a while, maybe you're only performing security updates once a month or something. It's still not great, but at least you're getting it out the door as opposed to these, years and years of updates sitting sadly unapplied. So I'm going to go back to this overall kind of reorient us to where we are. So you might have noticed a pattern in the last few slides. I really think with a legacy project, it's about picking a goal first. That's the very first thing. Pick your goal and then measure your progress towards that goal as you move through this sort of cycle of web ops. The sooner you can show that value, the sooner you'll be able to get more resources because people they want to invest in what's working. And if you can prove that it's working, all the more exciting and the more likely it is that you're going to be able to maybe do a progressive migration to Drupal 9 or whatever other cool thing you're always hearing about a DrupalCon and wanting to do with the project. So the last phase we haven't covered yet is productivity. This is really all about the way people are working on the site together. So you've got your impact still guiding the project. You've got your credibility. Now the developers can make changes. The content people can make changes. So now it's about sort of how are we collaborating and automating? And this is where we're starting to really see like efficiency gains and the team is starting to get aligned on the goals. I talked about that project I worked on where I don't know what the point of the website was. This was basically the poster child for how not to do collaboration. So how do your marketers and developers collaborate on your website? If the answer for your project right now is not at all, that's like 0 points towards the personality quiz, and that's okay. But we're going to need to get better at it. The project I was talking about, I literally only got to see the project owner once every 6 to 8 months, and he would only look at the project once every 6 to 8 months. We would have an hour-long meeting in which I would take frantic notes of everything that was sort of talked about, everything that was put on the table, work on it, and then kind of throw it back over the fence 6 months later. Invariably, it was nothing like what he remembered imagining 6 months prior. It was a completely broken process. So it didn't matter how great my code was. It didn't matter how robust my development process was. None of that mattered because we weren't actually speaking to each other on a regular basis. So how often are you talking? How integrated is your deployment process with your project management tool? That's going to be a level up moment. And of course, how is your web team planning? Are you using sprints and kind of iterating quickly, or is it these 6 month, I wouldn't even call it waterfall. I would call it like hot potato style project management. Just throw it over the fence and hope that it lands kind of thing. So this is kind of the area where you can really start to bring the team together and align around that goal. So it's not just 6, 8 months of very expensive development time wasted. And of course, automate routine tasks. Again, from a developer's perspective, I'm always thinking about scripting and development automation. But I think it's really, really important to open up this concept of automation beyond just the code base, right? Because it can mean all sorts of things. Project management tools have all kinds of automation built into them, workflows, assignment processes. So if you close a ticket, it'll assign the next ticket or alert someone on Slack. Those processes are just as important to get automated as your automated tests or your deployment process. So I think it's really helpful to kind of broaden the definition here and have everyone on the team look at where they could be automating, because everyone on the team is a human and humans make mistakes, humans forget steps of the process. And the more that everything can kind of be unified, where a project manager maybe is updating a ticket in Jira or Asana, and then that's alerting the developer as they're working in the code base, it really takes away a lot of that friction and can get people moving in the same direction very quickly. Of course, I do have a lot of opinions about automating code as well. You want to look at what stage your deployment workflow is at. So are you manually uploading your site to a server? I know plenty of people are still, when they do security updates, they're downloading zip files from Drupal.org, putting them on the server, unzipping them. Really, a lot of places things can go wrong using a process like that. So you want to, that's where Git comes into play. That's where deployment processes come into play. So you can automate some of that. Do you have automated testing and QA? And honestly, if you don't have automated testing and QA, because I think with legacy sites, it's incredibly hard to get those implemented right away. Having a manual test that's at least has a written rubric so that the testers are always testing the same things, so that people aren't just kind of, oh, I'm tired today, I'm distracted today, so I did a terrible manual testing job and then took the live site down, right? That's the kind of stuff we can automate that's not necessarily through the latest and greatest code achievements. And then once you're kind of really getting into this process, you can look at what percentage of developer time is spent on driving business value. So again, this goes back to, that you want newsletter signups, but your developer for some reason is being put on work to build a calendar, which maybe there's a connection there, but if you don't know what that connection is, it's worth taking that time to kind of get this. The more you can get automated, the more your developer can get to the stuff that matters, to the impact level. So now we're back here at step 0, right? So we've gone through this process, in our minds. And have we made progress? Is the site less delicate than it was before? Is it less fragile than when we started? Is it making progress towards its stated goals? And once you get up here again, you can then start to measure the results of the work you just did. And it really becomes a virtuous cycle. I think it's really, really helpful to kind of focus on this process rather than kind of panicking that the whole website's just a hot mess. Although I've been there, I've done it. I'm not judging. So let's take a look at the whole thing. This is the web ops model. I think it's really reflects the best projects I've worked on and kind of explains why the worst projects didn't come together. So I hope it's useful to you. And this is a model at Pantheon that we are still kind of working on and refining. I think it just changed last week. We changed some of the language around it. So I do have plenty of time. I think about 15 minutes. In a few minutes, I'll end my talk. So I'd love to hear questions, but also discussion around, how are these things working at your organization or not working at your organization? So we can go back and kind of keep refining this and keep becoming, better and better web ops professionals. So now we've got our fancy site, all tuned up, and it's no longer this rust bucket out in the forest. Few things before I go into questions that are just kind of housekeeping. Pantheon is hiring, and I feel like the kinds of people who come to this kind of session would be awesome additions to the Pantheon team. We have a new position called the Director of Web Ops, and what that person is actually going to be doing is this exact kind of work with Pantheon.io. So we are hoping to move off of, because it's a legacy site, off of Drupal 7, possibly into like a fancy Drupal 9 WordPress combined, cool, decoupled situation. I don't know. This person's going to find out. So if that kind of work sounds awesome to you, I will drop this link in the chat. It's like a referral link. So you'll get like a, hey, I met this person at Drupal Florida Drupal Camp. We're also hiring for customer success in several roles, and we're hiring tons and tons of engineers. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, please let us know. And I'm, of course, always available for questions if people want to chat about the job before or after they apply. So let me drop that in here. And then you've probably seen these slides. Oh, I think my paste didn't do a great job. My apologies, Florida Drupal Camp. The code of conduct is live at that link there. It is super important that we all know how we are expected to behave at an event like this. And of course, oh yeah, none of my pictures came through. Sorry, Amy, June, and Mike. If you do see something or hear something that you feel uncomfortable about, or you feel like is making someone else uncomfortable, please contact our code of conduct folks. They are really good at managing these kinds of situations and helping people feel safe and make the community a safer and more welcoming place for everyone. So please do take a look at the code of conduct and reach out if you have any questions or concerns. Tomorrow's contribution day. I love contribution day. It's one of my favorite things at any Drupal event. There will be general contribution as well as mentored contribution. And I'm thinking that a lot of us in the room are not developers, and there is room for you at contribution day. So there's workshops to get you started that are kind of mentoring and helping you get started and get your feet wet in the Drupal contribution space. So that is it. Thank you so much. I will be tweeting a link to the slides. I see somebody access to this recording, and I'm going to leave that up to Florida Drupal Camp's discretion. I'm not sure what they're doing with recordings. But yeah, we have 10-ish minutes for questions, observations, discussion. And I'll just sit here quietly for a moment. They are breaking recordings out and posting on the website and Drupal.tv. So yes, there will be a recording, and I will tweet that as well when it's ready. Well, all right. Please reach out if any questions do come to you afterwards. This is, like I said, it's a new talk in a new format at Pantheon, or a new kind of framework. So very, very open to all feedback, constructive or positive or anything. So please reach out. Have a great Florida Drupal camp. Thank you so much for coming today. And I hope this helps with your messy legacy projects going forward.